This is Your Other Brothers Podcast.
Fear, you're not my lover, you're not my friend, you're not my brother. Oh, and no, there's no room here. There's a vacancy in my heart, but it ain't for fear.
Welcome, friends, to Your Other Brothers Podcast, navigating faith, homosexuality, and masculinity together. From the Jewel of the Blue Ridge, my name is Tom. I'm so glad you are here. Joining us for this episode from the other side of the state, the city of Oaks, it's our other brother, Ryan. What's up, Ryan?
Hello. Not much. Good to see you, Tom.
Way to change it up. I've never heard you do that. Got to keep it fresh here on the YOBcast. And joining us from the city of Forts with a special new greeting of his own, it's our other brother, Jacob.
Hello, everyone.
And
Tom,
he just copies
really
Ryan.
good to see you.
I was testing your improv skills there.
I know, and I failed.
I love improv. We need to do a conversation on improv sometime. Can we please have that conversation? Not right now. I don't feel ready for it, which is ironic. Sure. Because improv is just be ready for anything. But
improv
anyway,
terrifies me.
Ooh, let's. We can't do that. We have a jam-packed show today. I can't add onto the list because I'll tag improv for a future episode with you guys because I would love to talk about that sometime. I'm sure our listeners would as well. Any Who's Line fans out there? Oh my gosh. I can't. That's a 30-minute conversation. I can't do it right now. It's a jam-packed episode, you guys. We're talking about celibacy today. Yes, celibacy. It only took us 64 episodes to get here. When I was looking at all the episodes we've done, I was like, how have we never talked about this before? It seems bizarre. Like, how did we overlook it? It was right in front of us all along, you guys. And here we are, 64 episodes later. So we're talking about celibacy. I don't know why I said it like that. Celibacy. We're talking about that today. So Ryan, Jacob, I'm excited to dive into that with you. And it really is a jam-packed show, you guys. When I was taking notes for this, I was like, man, I'm more conscious than ever of like keeping this show on a train track and not going out to Nepal somewhere. Like, we got to stay in the continental US with this show because there's just so much to get to. And we're going to get to it right away.
Mm-hmm. I think when you first mentioned this is what we would be talking about, I will admit that I was a bit concerned because I thought, like, what are we going to say? Like, I just couldn't think of much of like celibacy. But then, like, as I've been pondering it and having like conversations with myself out loud to like get ready for it, I went on and I thought, like, this is going to be like a 5-hour episode.
I just picture you in the shower and going to cooking meals and sitting in the living room and you're just talking to yourself about celibacy.
That's like oddly accurate, which I don't know if that's, I'm hoping there are others out in the world who also do such things. But
can I get the Alexa video feed on that? I would love to see that. Her and I only. Okay.
Allowed to see that.
Ryan, what are your thoughts on us diving into celibacy? This is like the pregame show. Like, what do you think about celibacy as a topic for today?
You know, I think for a lot of people, it's sort of the elephant in the room where they kind of maybe don't know what to think about it, or they're kind of freaked out by the idea. And it'd be good to talk about it. Good to figure out, what does it even mean? Because, I don't know. And now it's getting kind of awkward to ask.
I showed up to this podcast. I don't even know what it is really. It is the elephant in the room, the cellophant in the room, maybe. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this conversation goes. But before we get to that conversation, Jacob, I need to follow up with you on some things because I feel for your poor mother right now. Because I was told directly by you that because on our last episode, to give context, you said that your mother made you your own face masks, and that she like sewed a Bible verse on it or something. And like Ryan and I said, "Aw," and how cute and how adorable, and that's so great. And then I think it might have been a day later, you tell me that you have now submitted an order to unofficial sponsor of the show, Pair of Thieves. I guess it was like a lose-win situation. Like on the one hand, I talked to the viewer or to the listeners about how I purchased some Pair of Thieves masks and how they were breathable. And then y'all made fun of me that I was wearing underwear on my face and whatever. But then you proceeded to then purchase those, like betraying your mother. And so I just need to follow up with you and understand the thought process, because I don't know what was going through your head when this all happened. On the one hand, I'm like, I feel affirmed that you would take my lead and follow the path that I took. But then I just empathically feel for your mother, who must feel like she's been left in the dust. So care to explain yourself? Ryan, do you have something to say first?
Can I just jump in here and say that I too went and ordered some Pair of Thieves face masks.
Did you really?
They are grand. They're my new favorite face masks.
Aren't they though? Oh, yeah. Unofficial sponsor of the show, Pair of Thieves, not Mama Baranowski. So let's get to the son and see what he has to say.
So to answer your very harsh question, there comes a day in the life of every young man during a pandemic when he realizes that only one mask that he wears everywhere is simply not enough. I think that there, as we had talked about, there was once a time when this all started where it's like, well, yeah, like we're going to need to wear masks for like a couple of weeks. Okay,
so like she only made you one mask. I was under the impression that she made you like a whole one for every day of the week.
So she did make me two.
Okay.
The second one is the fabric is camouflage. And so
you're not repping the camo?
I opt to not wear that if I don't have to.
You did remember to come out to her, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I won't go into that anymore. But yes, I did pull the trigger on the Pair of Thieves, and it is identical to wearing their underwear on your face.
But isn't it delightful?
Is what it is. Okay, so yes, I would say by and large, excellent masks. I don't know if there's something different about my face than your face. Maybe it's because my nose is probably a bit longer and larger than yours is. But I do find myself wishing it was like half an inch or an inch like wider, because if it can like rest on just the tip of my nose and then it fits under my chin, or it goes over the bridge of my nose more and then gets like kind of closer to my mouth. It's just not quite tall enough. And I don't know if perhaps I'm just don't know how to wear masks correctly, or I have a large Polish face.
You just have abnormal dimensions. That's all.
Yeah, that's also very, very possible. And so that is the benefit of a mask custom made by your mother, who birthed me, is that she knows exactly how large our faces are, and so hers fits and feels much more comfortable in the fit. But the Pair of Thieves masks are super soft and breathable, and they've got fun.
They fit just like over your crotch, like it just
and it is right exactly. Over your nose. Yeah, it's there's uncanny. Even a little pouch.
Yeah, the pouch.
I'm not sure
exactly.
what the pouch is
fly,
to like. What is the pouch? Is that so that I can I actually poke my nose through the pouch when I need to blow it?
I know.
Yes,
I think it's for like a filter of some sort. Like,
that's what I was thinking. I was thinking surely Pair of Thieves has done some sort of scientific research, and they have engineered some extra layer in here that's what this like pouch is for. That was my thought process as well.
I also think that maybe you take like a evergreen tree car air freshener and you cut up one of those and shove that in the pouch.
Oh, there you go.
That you're constantly breathing ever fresh. Goodness.
Or you could just do some sort of essential oils thing where you just douse a cotton ball or something, just stick it up in there.
Tom,
just breathe peppermint
all
day.
With all your ideas. I'm excited.
These are free of charge to Pair of Thieves. Ryan, I'm so glad. This is a complete surprise that just fills me with joy that you have also followed the route of the Pair of Thieves face mask.
And And I want to put the offer out there that if Mrs. Baranowski would like to make me some underwear, I would try them out and see whether those are better than Pair of Thieves or not.
Would you like them to be camo?
I would be open to camo. I think the non-negotiables, I definitely want the Bible verse stitched onto the inside.
Yes, praise him. Yeah, definitely.
Perfect.
Love
that's
that.
what
Love that
Pair
so
of Thieves
much.
is not offering. That's the value added.
That's true. Yeah, it's the personal scriptural touch. That is a huge one that you're now lacking. But I
A very
also
personal
appreciate the
touch.
solidarity. Yeah, the solidarity of face masks with you boys is quite lovely. We just need.
I just find it interesting though that I was very quick, Tom, to let you know that I was making this purchase. For some reason though, Ryan felt the need to keep this secret. And I'm curious to hear more about the thoughts that went into because I would assume that you were going to tell us at some point, but yet
Maybe he was saving it for the show, right?
Oh, that's possible.
Sure.
Yeah, big reveal. And it clearly had the impact he thought it would. So I'm so glad that he did that. It was great to have both. The one that I knew, because otherwise I may not have brought this up if you never told me, Jacob. So thank goodness we had this conversation. However, I do need to put this out to Pair of Thieves because I got to keep them accountable. Like I'm not going to just throw all this love and adoration, lest you forget the last episode of this podcast where they have still yet to update their Slim Fit Boxer production, which as a silent protest, I was very conscious with my underwear selection today, and you know what I'm wearing right now?
Warriors and monks or whatever.
The sword and the
I felt really bad.
Sword and the stones.
I felt really bad for giving this huge shout out to Warriors and Scholars in the last episode, and I completely forgot what their logo was. I was like, it's a pen and something, an axe or something. But I can confirm, looking down, it's a sword and a pen, and I'm so thrilled and pleased with them. But again, the silence from Pair of Thieves is deafening, and I really would love to hear what they have to say about this. But until then, I'll keep supporting their face masks. But that's all for now. To be continued.
I hate to be the one to ask this, Tom, but when you say that you look down and you can see their logo, are you telling me that you're not wearing pants?
I am wearing pants, yes, but I can see the waistband. Yeah, so
you're one of those people.
I meant to record this episode pantsless, but I forgot.
We'll have a pantless episode someday. How fun would that be?
So fun.
When we do the underwear episode, we should do it pantless.
That's actually kind of a good idea.
That's fun, right? That's festive.
That's festive.
Yeah.
Dramatic.
For all those that are really concerned right now, all of our cameras are from the midsection up, from the mid torso up. So that's the visual right now. So everyone calm down. Calm down, everybody. And so I'm comfortable. I'm lounging on the floor once again. Second episode in a row, you guys, that I'm sitting on the floor, breaking my streak of I don't even know, 20, 30 episodes standing up. I love standing up. So this is a brand new experience for me. I forgot to mention in all of the newness of sitting on the floor last time, you guys, that I have this new standing desk that I'm utilizing very well right now. I had this standing desk and I built it, and I felt so masculine putting it together because it was like a 17-step process of screwing in these things and nailing it in and adjusting this and swiveling this. And it took me 2 hours to put together. And I was so excited to use it primarily for the podcast. I mean, other things too. Just when I'm working, I can stand up instead of sitting down, just to vary my work postures. But yeah, now for the podcast, to achieve the better sound quality, I've sunk to the ground, surrounded by pillows and blankets, and it's like my own little magical fort, 12 inches off the ground. So here I am, and maybe one day I will stand again. But until that day. Well, like I said, you guys, this is a huge show, jam-packed. We have a lot to get to, starting with our brand new, exciting segment that I'm so glad is taking off. And it's our voicemail segment. We have this phone number. We've had it for such a long time. It's been frozen like urine in space. And we now have the ability. People are using it. People are calling. And we had quite the response, actually, to our last episode. We talked about the sex talk And it was like, that was a surprise hit, you guys. We had so much pre-episode conversation in our YOBBERS group on Facebook and some post conversation as well. Jacob, you made a comment during the episode. I don't even remember why were you talking about this, but you were mentioning something like Team Jacob. Oh yeah, we were talking about new school versus the old school cast. And we have you guys on who are Team New School. And then when we have Dean and Matt on, they've been with me from the beginning. And so that's Team Old School. And so then you put it out there that there's this tangent team, which is just includes you. It's Team Jacob.
Yeah. No,
and you encourage people to call and proclaim their devotion to you. Is that about right so far?
Because we had brought up this possible competition between the new team and the old team, I had postulated that there is a group, I think I said like 3 or 4 people who are listeners who are big fans of me and only me. And I wanted them to rally behind me so that episodes that I have the privilege of being a host on can just skyrocket in the ratings and what have you. And so I put out the Jacob signal to the internet and said, come to my aid, one and all. Yes. And I said there was a remnant of Jacob listeners who exist.
So Tom, how many people rallied behind Jacob? And
Let me tell you. So it's funny. I have to give the journey of this. So we received a comment on the blog, which you can go to yourbrothers.com/podcast and read all the comments. But this one in particular said, "Am I the only one that's here because #Team Jacob?" To which I responded, "Yep." Because up until that juncture, I ain't heard nothing about Team Jacob. There was no Team Jacob happening. And so this one person put it out there, which was fun. It's a fun comment on our site. We have a lot of fun on our website from time to time. And then it was like, I don't know, a day or two later, though, I checked the YOB line. I checked the voicemail message archive. And lo and behold, you guys.
Full of Team Jacob calls.
This is what I heard. Take a listen.
Hey, guys. I just listened to the most recent Your Other Brothers podcast episode, the sex talk episode, and just wanted to reflect on one of the important parts, the introduction, of course. And I'm referencing more specifically the discussion about Team Jacob. So I have to say, I actually resonate with Ryan in kind of being wildly uncompetitive and not super prone to throwing my support behind any one team. Jacob, you seem great. I'm just not here to pick one side or the other. But at one point, this term was referenced in the podcast, which caught my attention, and that term was Jacob's remnant. And the whole rest of the episode, I couldn't help but just keep thinking that is a fantastic cult name. To the point where I Googled it and found nothing but potential, that is. So anyway, that's just me here to say, I can't sign up for Team Jacob, Jacob's remnant. Keep me posted. Is this the next great Your Other Brothers offshoot? The true believers, perhaps? Or, that maybe this is the next level of Patreon support. A new goal to add. Hey, and more seriously, just wanted to say thank you guys for all you do. I so respect and appreciate how you guys use your voices and your stories to encourage and edify your brothers. Many people are the beneficiaries of your wisdom and your ministry. So thank you so much for all the time and effort you guys put into the community. So much love to all you guys.
So Jacob, thank you first of all to this amazing listener for calling in, for proclaiming your devotion, and for giving us props on the episode. That was like the PS. It's like, oh yeah, that was a great episode. But first, let's go to our cult leader over here. What does the leader of Jacob's
This is all
remnant
taking a really
have
dark
to say?
turn.
Okay, my two questions are: A, do you know who this person is? Because he didn't introduce himself, and I didn't recognize the voice myself. And B, it could be the same person who commented on our site. So I'm not sure if you didn't or didn't know if it was the same person, to which the count of Team Jacob would still be at 1, but it could be 2. So do you have any thoughts, any feedback on this call?
Yeah. So question A, I don't know who this person is. They have become my new favorite person, though, so I can say that.
Congratulations.
I was nervous, though, at the beginning of their message where they didn't quite seem on board with the whole Team Jacob thing. And I thought that the rest of it would just be like completely bashing me. But I'm thankful that there was something in our last episode that sparked such energy and passion that he could envision himself being a part of this future remnant that will come from the ashes,
just like you said. I mean, Jacob's remnant. Jacob, if you ever want to do a side podcast, a side thing, you mentioned doing like a new Patreon tier. Maybe it's like the next level of bonus content. You can, if you want to access Jacob's remnant, $500 a month.
If there would be a way that this could end up increasing the overall support of this entity, then I am all for being like, oh, if you reach this X number, then I'll start like making shirts for Jacob's remnant.
Hashtag Jacob's remnant. We'll see if that turns into anything. Sometimes on the show we say things and we have like funny ways of saying things and they stick, like our Pair of Thieves devotion goes back many episodes now. And so we'll see. We'll just have to see if Team Jacob or Jacob's remnant is something that sticks, or if the listeners decide, nope, we don't want that.
I think it could be fun if some of this stuck. The idea of me being a cult leader, I do hope that dissipates rapidly. But like some of this, I was honest with you, Tom, from the beginning, that when you first asked me to be one of the hosts, I'm pretty sure that I told you that my long-term mission was to slowly infiltrate and take over Yob from the inside out. So this is kind of like my coming out party part 2, to where I start my own podcast where I take all of the listeners and the followers for my own. So just want that to be,
and I apologize.
It's an open and honest.
I apologize
honest
to all the listeners for that harrowing picture that was just painted for you. I'm sorry for the chills that went down everyone's backs as they listened to that possible future. No, I'm thrilled that you're here, Jacob. And who knows? Maybe Ryan will get a remnant too. Maybe we'll all get remnants when this is all said and done. Who knows? We'll see where this thing goes. So yes, big shout out to that listener. Thank you for calling. I also wanted to give some love to this listener, brand new to our show and called. So here's what he had to say.
Hello, brothers. This is Ryan. I'm a new brother here. Just wanted to say hello to everyone. And I came across, this podcast through the You Are the Brothers website. I had reached out to Eugene on there after reading some of the stuff he had written, and that proceeded to me finding the YOBBERS Facebook group, and I commented after joining the Facebook YOBBERS group. Thank you, everyone, for showing me how our churches should be welcoming every new member of the body. You give me hope. So thank you to each and every one of you. God bless you all, and chat soon.
A fellow Ryan. Hello.
Another
Thank you
Ryan.
for listening, and thank you for calling in. It means a lot to us.
This is what I wanted to say. So first of all, to Ryan, to the new Ryan that called and support. He's now a Yobber. He's supporting Yob. It's like awesome. Awesome to have your support. But I wanted to ask the original Ryan, not that there's only been 2 Ryans to support Yob, but for the sake of simplicity, I was going to ask Ryan Berger, when you joined Yob, or right around when you joined Yob, had we had a Yob line at the time, would you have called and left your support as this new Ryan did?
Absolutely not.
Thank you. I was 99% sure that would be the answer, but I just wanted to confirm.
When I first started listening to this podcast, you guys were just talking about things that I really wanted to talk about. But I couldn't join into the conversation. I just had to like listen as an outsider. And so I think having to call in and sort of join in a little bit would have like driven me crazy. I wouldn't have wanted to do it just like partially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. And that's fine. I understand and recognize that calling the Yob line is not for everybody, but it is for somebody. And maybe that somebody is you. And we actually got some other calls too. One left some feedback on the episode, which I appreciated. And someone else, it was funny because I'm not going to play it because he actually referenced a YOBBERS, which is our bonus podcast for our Patreon supporters, our YOBBERS. And he referenced, do you guys remember when I told the story of meeting Stephen Curtis Chapman? That was several episodes ago. So he referenced that encounter and how he also met, with air quotes, the viewers, the listeners can't see, but I'm using air quotes around meet. He also met not Stephen Curtis Chapman, but a CCM star in his own right, Mr. Peter Furler of the Newsboys, the bald-headed guideliner wearing guy from the Newsboys, and how it was like the exact same thing, like in a coffee shop, like totally secondhand, like no direct interaction whatsoever. So I felt very affirmed thanks to that phone call left as well. So if any of that intrigues you guys to become YOBBERS and listen to our bonus content, we have so much. Y'all, I met Stephen Curtis Chapman. It's a true story.
You did not.
I totally met him.
If that is what it means to meet someone, I have met hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, you have. Own it. So yes, that is our Yob line voicemail segment for today. Please, if you hear something in this episode that you want to respond to, something about celibacy, which is what we're about to talk about, give us a call, 706-389-8009. I know you already have it programmed in your phones, everybody, because I've been mentioning it so much lately, but it's been really fun these last couple episodes to get to field these calls and to kind of to hear voices. It's just special. It's special to hear y'all's voices. Y'all's voices make me smile. So thank you for calling. And I look forward to putting more voices on the show as we continue. Before we get to the announcements, though, circling back to our last episode, one last time, we need to include the elder Baranowski brother into this conversation on the sex talk, because he had some thoughts to share on this episode. He had this to say after listening to our episode, because Jacob, you revealed some stories from the Baranowski childhood that included him. So he felt inclined to then, provide his side of the story and give some context and give a little elaboration as only Nate Baranowski can do. So appreciate Nate for sending in his thoughts, his side of the story. But I actually really thought, this is all silly and jokey, but I actually really appreciated his feedback, his thoughts on the baby boomer generation in particular, because we were talking about, like why were all our parents so weird about sex, about the sex talk? What was that about? Why couldn't this just be a normal conversation? But I love what Nate had to say. Nate said this: picture this. Our parents lived through a sexual revolution and either did some stuff, in quotes, or fought back with very strict purity, an era defined by sexual curiosity. So our generation had a lot of parents who wanted to shield our curiosities or were ashamed of their own past, hoping our generation would avoid all of that by not exposing us. Isn't that so wide? Do you guys agree with that? Does that jive with you? Because that totally kind of like fits. Like I'm like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, the only pushback I have is why didn't he call the voicemail and say that? You know what?
Here's the deal. I asked him for permission if I could read his text, because he texted this, and he was like, sure. And then as a follow-up, I said, or feel free to call the Yob line if you'd like to elaborate more, winky face. And never got that message in the mail. And I was a little disheartened, I'll be honest. And I am sorry Nate has to find out about this indirectly through the podcast. I could have just told him, why didn't you call? I wanted to hear your voice. But he, I don't know. I guess is it fine to say he's a new father? Is he keeping that private or
no,
I don't know. He's a new father.
He tweeted about it. Yeah.
Yeah. He posts, I don't want to put his private life on display, but he's a recently new father, which is exciting. So I understand that he's probably kind of busy right now. So maybe he just didn't have the time, but he did have the time to send this text, which, that's all I'm going to say. But then Jacob, something real quick. So this is the last thing I had to say. Cause I asked him because you mentioned on the show that you found out about gay people from your brother, or something to the effect of your brother told you that, yeah, gay people, they have lots and lots and lots of sex. Lots and lots and lots of sex. To which Nate responded, and I quote, "I don't remember saying how much sex they had." End quote. So what say you, Jacob? Did you exaggerate for the sake of your remnants?
It was an episode where I was really trying to boost. Yeah, I mean, I've been on this kick to boost ratings now to where, like, if I need to make things up or embellish things, then I'm gonna do it, Tom. So this is all your fault.
Yeah, I sensed some embellishment there.
No,
Jacob, Nate did not remember.
There's a whole host of things he doesn't remember. My goodness.
Because I asked him, like, so where on the streets did you hear this, that gay people have lots and lots of sex? And he just flat out said, I don't remember. So my thought is Jacob either lied or legitimately, or, I mean, those are the only two options, right? Either Jacob lied or he just doesn't remember. So I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll let the listeners decide, as always.
Boy.
So there's that. Hey, you guys, you know what we haven't had in forever?
What, Tom?
An Apple Podcast review.
Oh.
And I say that with the admission that we have no new Apple Podcast reviews. We do not have any, you guys. We have not had any for several episodes. And while it makes me sad, I also need to appreciate the fact that we have acquired 119 of these things. And so I have to wonder, like, how much is enough? You know, would 500 be enough? Would 1,000 be enough? Would 1,000,000 be enough? Like, there probably isn't a number that would be enough to satisfy the support that I crave and desire and sometimes need. So it's been a lesson in just being humbled that we haven't gotten any new reviews lately. But because I was desperate, you know what I did? I went searching for reviews in other places. So, because you guys, I don't know if anyone's aware, like, our podcast is available on so many mediums. I mean, on this alone, some people are listening on Apple Podcasts. Hello, Apple people. We have some people listening on Spotify. What's up, Spotify people? We have some people listening through all sorts of other apps like Podbean, or my personal favorite, Overcast. I listen to all of my podcasts on Overcast. You can adjust, like, the volume boost. It kind of gives more of a bass to people's voices, or you can slow and speed people up. I don't like doing that, but you have that option. There's also chapters in Overcast. So our podcast is chaptered now. So if you want to skip all this chit chat and announcements, you can go straight to the main topic if you want, just by clicking on that button. So there's a lot of great apps out there that our podcast is available on. And there's another one called Stitcher. I tried Stitcher for a time. Stitcher is a great podcast app. And so I found this 5-star review on Stitcher from a year ago. That I just felt bad. Like, I always give all the love to the Apple Podcast, because that's like where most of the traction goes. Like, you want to support our podcast because by far the most, vast majority of our listeners come through that medium. So I just felt bad that someone left a 5-star review on Stitcher, and it's just gone unnoticed for the last year. So I wanted to give some love to Artist03 on Stitcher for writing this 5-star review a year ago. And it says a year ago, but it probably rounded. So it could have been like a year and 5 months ago. Who knows? Who knows when this was actually left? But Artist03 had this to say. He said, "Amazing podcast. These guys are the best. Hearing other Christians talk about the struggles of being side B, not just within the church, but society as well, is so refreshing. And they don't hold back on any topic. The vulnerability and honesty can be heard through each episode. I've just come across them a couple months ago, and I'm so glad I did. Give the guys a listen." So Artist03 just got here a couple months ago, which is now like 2 years ago. Thank you. I hope you're still with us. I hope you're still listening. And just thanks for the love and for the support. It means so much.
And we hope that Stitcher's working out for you.
Yes. Please tell us, give us a call on the Yob line, or shoot me an email if you're still listening on Stitcher. And big shout out to everyone listening on Stitcher. I mean, if you're anyone who's listening on Stitcher, give me a call. Tell me how it's going. Wrapping up these announcements, you guys, we're back up to 187 patrons. There's a fun, wah last time when we went down to 184, but Patreon's done all their calculations, and gotten everyone's credit cards checked. And so we're back up to 187 patrons. And for those that don't know, we're on this mission to get to 200, mission 200. We'd love to do the Convo cast again. And I already have an idea of who our first guest will be when we have the Convo cast's grand return. So it's up to you guys to make it happen. If you've never supported Job and you've been curious about it and joining this YOBBERS community, now is the time to be one of those 13 people now to get us over the top. So check out patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information on that. And before we get into this episode, as always, we need to thank our sponsor, which no is not Pair of Thieves or Warriors and Scholars, although the offer is ever on the table, especially for the latter now, to become a sponsor of this show. But because we're talking about celibacy, and you can't spell celibacy, or you can't spell part of it. You can't, let me get this straight. You can't spell celebrate without some of the letters in celibacy. And what better way to celebrate than with cake? Thank you, Cake, for sponsoring this episode of Your Other Brothers podcast. It's just what we do when we celebrate. If it's a birthday, if it's an anniversary, if it's someone's celibate day, I don't know, celibate anniversary, if it's the anniversary of your call to celibacy, you get a cake. That's just the norm. That's what you do. So thank you, Cake, for sponsoring all of our celebrations, celibate or otherwise.
Beautiful.
You know, when I give the sponsor read, I look at my co-host and I'm like, please have something to say. Please respond in some way. And instead I just get, that's fun. Let's get to the main topic now, is what I see through their eyes. Yes, thank you, Cake. We'll thank Cake again later. So if you guys have something to say about Cake at the end of the episode, by all means. But yeah, no, for real, you guys, we're talking about celibacy today, which has taken a long time to get to. And I'm kind of surprised that it took this long, because we've talked about singleness a couple times. We did a singleness episode back in the day. And I think it was last year around the holidays, we did a holiday singleness, like a special themed episode around the season, which is close. It sort of skirts what we're going to be talking about today, but there is a difference. And I want to delve into those differences today, singleness versus celibacy, what the overlap is, and kind of more specifically, since we've talked some about singleness in the past, let's talk about celibacy today. Something I'm getting in the habit of doing, which I mentioned in our last episode, which I love, is putting polls in our YOBBERS group on Facebook. And I put this poll out to them for this episode, asking them, do you feel called to celibacy? And I left it very open-ended intentionally. I was like, I'm not going to explain what that means. I'm just going to put that question out there. Do you feel called to celibacy? And I put it out there to the singles, because we have, a good portion of married guys in the group. So I was like, okay, obviously they're out of the running. But for the single people, those that are single, do you feel called to celibacy? And I gave them 3 options: yes, no, or I am open. I'm open to lifelong celibacy, or I'm open to marriage one day. And so same as last time. I don't know if Jacob saw the poll, because Jacob's in the group. Jacob, are you fresh? Or did you spoil your eyes?
Well, no,
okay.
I have not seen it, so I'm okay. Fresh.
So you're going to participate as well. So yeah, I wanted to ask you guys, what do you think? How do you think the numbers fell amongst those 3 options, percentage wise? We had around 50 or so people cast votes. So I'm curious how many you think felt open to either celibacy or marriage, or if they just straight voted yes or no, called to celibacy. What do y'all think?
I'm going to go with 60% said open, and then the remaining 40% were split between yes and no. So 20% on yes and no.
Okay. What you, Jacob?
I'm going 40% open, 40% yes, 20% no.
Ooh. One of you was closer than the other, rather. And that person was Ryan. 64%, Ryan, were open to either marriage or celibacy. A solid 25% said they feel called to celibacy. And a scant 11% say they do not feel called to celibacy. So that's how it fell. So I wanted to put that question out to you guys, and then I'll answer it too, of course. is how would you answer that question? How would you have voted in that poll?
I've struggled always with the idea of calling. Like, what does it mean to be called? Like, would I know? Like, I don't think that God has ever given me like a vocal calling, like, like Samuel in the temple or whatever. But and so in a lot of ways, I feel like the things that I'm called to, or like calling in my life, has looked like conviction about sin that I feel led or called to repent of and walk away from. Like, that's when I think of calling, like those are the strongest experiences of calling that I've experienced. In terms of like callings, like, oh, am I called to live in this area, not that area, or called to this ministry or that ministry or whatever. Often kind of my experience of that has just been, well, I got to pick a direction and start walking, and like, if that turns out to be wrong, I can change directions. And I think God gives us a lot of freedom to kind of figure things out on our own. And so in that sense, I don't feel called. In that sense, I do feel called to celibacy in that it's a good direction to start walking. And like, I can see how God will work through it and work in it. And it's kind of the, just what I've decided to do with my life. But on the flip side, I don't feel a specific calling to celibacy that excludes marriage in particular, if that makes sense.
Good answer. So how would you have voted?
That's why I talked for like 5 whole minutes, because I don't know how to say yes or no.
I'm holding you to the fire.
I probably would have said open.
Open. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to make light of your answer, because that was a very well thought out answer. What about you, Jacob?
Yeah, I think I would say open too, for a lot of the same reasons that Ryan already shared. I have this concern that when we talk about calling, like you just said, is that it's almost always in this context of like this lifelong, permanent, fixed, never changes thing of how we think about calling in a very grand way, and at times it gets a little bit too grandiose for me, to where when if I'm going to use the language of called to be celibate, I would actually bring it down much more to like the everyday nitty gritty of life, to where I would say if you are a follower of Jesus and you wake up single and you are seeking to follow him in obedience and purity, then for that day, you are called to be celibate. As simple as that. Like, in where you find yourself, that is a clear calling for tomorrow. One of my fears is kind of like when people either say that they feel called to be celibate or they feel called to be married, in how that actually works out in practical life, I become puzzled, because I think about a person who, let's say, answered that poll saying, no, I don't feel called to be celibate. I feel called to marriage. And then let's say that in God's providence, they actually don't get married for another 10 years. In those 10 years that they are living as a single person, if they're seeking to live the best kind of singleness as God has called them to live, is their life really supposed to look radically different from a person who would say that they feel called to celibacy? So then when it actually works itself out in the practical, I kind of ask myself, like, okay, what's the point of knowing that, like, I feel called to lifelong celibacy, or knowing that I feel called to one day be married?
Yeah, and you sort of bring up an important distinction that I don't think we've hit yet, which is between singleness and celibacy. Like, what's the difference between those? And it sounds like we all sort of see the difference in that singleness is a state that kind of anyone that we're kind of born into by default, and more than 50% of us die in. And then celibacy is kind of this like decision or this commitment, this like a destination to arrive at with your singleness or with your sexuality. And you make sort of a commitment to it or vow or something to it. Does that sound right?
Yeah, it's circumstantial. Yeah, it's circumstantial versus vocational, right? Something that's just the way it is, whether you're not dating, not getting married, or you did get married and then you became widowed or divorced or whatever. Like, so there's circumstances that cause singleness versus celibacy, which is something you are actively choosing. And from my understanding, it's something you're choosing, not just like, oh yeah, for 5 years, for 10 years. Like, this is something that people are choosing to the end. And that's kind of the crux of the conversation, is like, do any of us feel that? And to add my sense, because I haven't answered the question yet. I first heard this question. Well, I mean, I guess I've heard that phrase, called to celibacy or called to marriage. I've heard those competing phrases for years and years and years now. But I never even, like, I've just always looked at my singleness and my celibacy as circumstantial, both of those, my whole life. And it really wasn't until like a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago, actually, that I was in counseling. And my counselor actually point blank, because I told him, God only knows the things I told this man, but I told him so much. And he looked me in the eye and was like, do you feel called to celibacy? Because he knew my beliefs and he knew my sexuality and knew all that. And he just put it in words that no one's ever asked me directly before. Do you feel called to celibacy? Because he was very familiar, like, he had such an eclectic background. He was very familiar with the Catholic Church and different monasteries. He'd visited so many monasteries and was very familiar with #monk life. He had a lot of knowledge about vocational singleness. And so I told him, like, no, I've never, like, similar to what Ryan said and what Jacob was echoing, like, I've never seen the light from heaven or heard the voice in the night, like little Samuel. Can you imagine little Samuel getting the call to celibacy as like a little 8-year-old? That would be so cute. But I've never gotten that call. I never heard the phone ring to give me that message. And that's fine. Like, I'm okay with that. I'm okay. Maybe that'll change 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Maybe I will feel a call to move in that direction. Because right now I would also vote in the open category, very open to marriage, very open to it. Even though I've never dated a girl and have no desire to in the near future. I've heard too many stories in our community where that was their mindset too. And then all of a sudden it just kind of, one thing led to another and it happened. And so I'm open to it. I'm not actively seeking it, but
you just used the language of, like, if you did receive that call, if you received that call to celibacy, that you would move in that direction. I guess my question is, how would, like, what does that moving in that direction change about the way that you're choosing to live now?
I think it would remove, I mean, obviously I would continue to not have sex. That would be a thing for sure. That would manifest. I don't know. I think it would remove a lot of, like, mental, I wouldn't even say energy that I'm reserving for marriage, but there is a part of my brain and a part of my heart that is reserving some space for that. Like, I'm open to it. Right. And so the fact that if I felt called to celibacy, if I felt like God wants me to be single and celibate and love him and love people the rest of my days, no longer would I have to be distracted by that concept of getting married, and more prominently for me, becoming a father. Like, I think, although that's another rabbit trail, because I could be a father if I wanted to be single, but that's a whole other thing. But that's kind of the bigger pull for me, is like the concept of a family, of creating my own family, biologically versus chosen family, which we've done we've done an episode on that, and we've talked about chosen family, and there's beauty and merit to both. Of course, there's not one that's better than another, but yeah, I don't know that it would change a whole lot personally, but it would just kind of make it clear. It would make a clearer story that, okay, I'm no longer even entertaining this idea because I just feel like God is so strongly spoken. Be single and be content in that. And there'll be hard days. Sure. There absolutely will be, but lean on me, lean on your fellow brothers and sisters and go love. So
yeah, a friend of mine told me recently he was going to start praying about whether he was like called to celibacy, and kind of my question for him, but also I was wondering like, what's my answer to that question? But the question was like, what does it cost you to like leave that open? You know, like what are you getting by making this decision, making this commitment? Because I mean, I'm kind of like you said, where you're at right now, Tom, of kind of reserving this space in your head or your heart or your life for marriage. Like that's where I was like right out of college, where, you know, I wasn't buying any kitchen stuff because I was like, well, this is stuff people put on their registry. So I better not like just go ahead and buy kitchen stuff. Better not buy dishes or whatever. And then I realized, you know what? Like if I want to buy dishes, I'm going to buy dishes. And so maybe that was my commitment to celibacy was.
Yeah. Wifey will just have to deal. Right. She will take my Sufjan plate collection.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that's, so I could see like if you're a person who just doesn't, who has that kind of like, you have to have decisions made about your life. Like if that benefits you in some way, I could see that sort of explicit commitment being valuable. But for me, and I guess my personality is that like, it costs me a lot to make decisions. And so like and it costs me nothing to just leave it open. And so that's kind of like why I haven't really gone through that process of like trying to discern a calling about celibacy or marriage.
I wanted to sprinkle in some perspectives from our yobbers, because in addition to voting in the poll, they also had some comments, some more good discussion. We were on a roll, you guys, these last few episodes, some really great discussion happening in the yobbers group about these episodes before we record them. And so these are from two openers. I'm just going to call them openers because they voted open in the poll. And I resonate with a lot of what each of them had to say. The first one said, I feel like saying, quote unquote, I'm called to celibacy is taking away the possibility for God to work in my life toward a potential marriage and hopefully kids. So I'm trying to find the balance between believing that God can make me a husband someday if that's his will. But if not, my life will be fulfilled either way because Jesus is the only one I really need. And we'll talk about, because I don't want to denigrate people who feel called to celibacy as if they've given up on that option. Like God's not going to provide them a wife or something, because that's a legitimate calling as well. And that's not what this person was trying to get across. I'm just clarifying that. But we had also this other comment. This person said, I don't feel that I've ever really felt an actual calling from God to be married. It's funny because for so long, I thought that marriage was how God was ultimately going to end up using me to bring glory to himself through turning my story of brokenness, shame, and desperation into a story of healing, freedom, and hope. I always envisioned myself being able to one day share my testimony with others with my wife sitting by my side. I thought, how could my story possibly be inspiring to anyone without God allowing me to have a wife and kids in the end? I realize now that God doesn't need me to be married to use me or my story to encourage others. I've also come to realize that just because I don't feel God calling me to marriage doesn't mean that he's then by default calling me to a life of celibacy. Right now, I believe God is calling me to be content and to completely place my trust in him for my future. I don't know if I'll ever be married or not, but I trust that God will place that desire in my heart when and if he wants that for me. And
amen.
I just love, I don't know. I love all of our yobbers equally. Y'all are all my children that I don't have because I'm celibate. But no, I just love the thoughts, love the perspectives, for the feedback. Thanks you guys for commenting. And I kind of feel that way. Like I hesitate to choose a vocational celibacy because then I second guess myself. I'm like, well, wait, what if I'm like canceling out God potentially wanting to do something? I'm just like closing that. But then it's like, it's paradoxical, because if I feel called by God, that's not my choosing. That's what I feel God choosing for me and telling me to follow. So then therefore marriage wasn't even on the table anyway. So it's a little confusing, but also kind of not. I'm really regretting, for all the prep work I did for this episode, I'm really regretting not reaching out to one of our 25% yesers who said they are called to celibacy. Because like, what I should have just at least messaged a few of them and said like, hey, like, you mind just sending me a sentence or two? Like, what do you mean? How do you feel called? Do you just pray about it for a long time? Did you like talk to a mentor, a pastor, counselor, and you kind of pieced it together over time, or was it a flash of light? Was it a phone ringing? Like, what was it? I'd be curious to kind of learn, what does that call look like? Because I wish I had a firsthand perspective to share, but alas, I do not.
Yeah. So if you've been called, you can give us a call and let us know.
Good segue.
Yes. Love it. That's why Ryan's on the show so much, you guys. Just for reasons like that. That was beautiful. To break up the tension, you guys, because this is a heavy topic, this is a deep, serious topic. Someone in the group also commented, can we talk about how Yoda was celibate for over 800 years? to which I then responded, yeah, wait until Disney fills in the gaps of his storyline, though. We're going to get like 37 wives and 500 children over the last millennia. Just wait for that.
I do find that I wish that the call, or at least something like the call to celibacy, was more of a normal thing, to where it does feel like it has to be such, like, unless you have been visited by an angel who has verbally told you like you will be celibate, that's the only way. Like, it's such a, I think it's seen as such kind of a like rare, possibly kind of like weird way to live, or like way to be called, and that is simply not biblical. And I wish that it was something that even if that kind of like became sort of the default for Christians, of like that's kind of what everyone sort of assumes, but then some might possibly be married, and as Paul says, you know what, to then get married is not a sin.
I've noticed that celibacy can be pretty stigmatized. Like, it's just sort of this weird, like, incomprehensible, inscrutable thing to be. I remember the first Revoice conference a few years ago. I took an Uber somewhere, and I don't.
Oh yeah, I remember this story. Tell it again.
Yeah, and I don't remember how I got talking to. Or I'm sorry, it was Lyft, not Uber, in case it matters.
Another unofficial sponsor of the show.
I don't remember how we got to talking about about celibacy, because I didn't tell the Lyft driver that I was here for a Christian conference about LGBT people not having sex with each other. And
I'm like, how in the world did you get to that conversation if that's not your starting point? Because that was my thought. I was like, I'm here for a conference. What's the conference about? Oh, we're a bunch of Christians.
Well, I might have said a Christian conference.
Have a traditional belief.
I think I said it was a Christian conference, and then he started talking about the Catholic Church and about how the child molestation epidemic or whatever happening in the Catholic Church is because all the priests are celibate, and if they could just have more sex, that would cure them
any sex
that would cure them of whatever is causing them to molest children. And like, I was just like, wow, I don't even know like where to start with that. Like, it's just a
5-star Lyft review right there.
Yeah.
Great conversation. There's like the sub options on Lyft and Uber where you can say great conversationalist or clean car or awesome music. That's clean a great conversationalist.
Weird views on celibacy.
Where's that button? Wow. Okay. Yeah, I remember you telling me this story.
There's stuff like that, and then if you've heard the term incels, which stands for involuntary celibates.
Please share.
Oh, it's this sort of like far right internet demographic that it's men who have determined that they are, quote, involuntary celibates, and it's kind of like the world, culture, women, whatever, have conspired against them to just prevent them from having sex because they're not like they don't
Worthy
happen
enough.
to be genetically perfectly good looking,
Right.
and in shape or whatever.
Like they feel owed sex, but they're not getting it.
Right.
And so they're celibate by default because the women aren't just throwing themselves upon them.
Yeah, and there's a lot going on there, but I think one thing to point out is that the reason why they see celibacy as this like living hell is because our society, our culture hasn't really given people much of an imagination for how your life can be good and beautiful and meaningful without sex or romance.
Right. And it can be, you guys, we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Are our lives not beautiful and meaningful without it?
Yes.
We laugh and we joke, but
and then we cry.
Well, and so then I wondered, am I a volcel, voluntary celibate? So
ooh,
volcels
volcel.
rise up.
All cells rise. We laugh and we joke and then we cry. I had this question though, because another Yobber had this question. Do you struggle with the idea of celibacy? One word answers, please.
No.
I do not.
Sorry, is the question, I would assume, do I personally struggle with it or just as a concept, as a whole?
Do you personally, because we're personal here at Your Other Brothers podcast, do you struggle with celibacy, Jacob Baranowski, on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, or a monthly basis, or a yearly basis?
Yeah, I would say that I,
because you mentioned in the past that you
on a bi-yearly basis.
Yearly basis, okay. Because I know you, Jacob, you mentioned on the show, I forget what episode it was. Well, what episode would that have been? I don't even know. Intimacy or something. But you've mentioned a couple times actually. I think what you want in a sexual relationship is just like that level of intimacy that's reserved, like it's special, it's sacred, it's unique. It's not something you typically would have with lots of people. I mean, some people do. And you go on the Maury show, as we know from my childhood, that people have lots of sex with lots of people. But
I'm not the father.
Right. So I know you've mentioned that for yourself, and so I could see how
Yeah, I mean, I think
could be hard.
I think that when you pose the question, do you struggle with celibacy? You're in a sense asking like, do you struggle with not having sex? I would say that by and large, I don't struggle with not having sex. Do I struggle with a lot of the other relational realities that come with being married? Yeah, for sure. Would sex be a part of that? Yeah, it would. But like when it comes to when I think about being celibate and what that means, just from like a physical point of view, like no, that's not the biggest issue that I wrestle with.
And I mean, we're such a diverse community because like you have me on the other side who's like, you know, I've never felt that inclination, really, the physical sexual inclination for another person. And then you have plenty of other people in our group who like, that's a legitimate thing. Like there were people, I kind of wanted to get their stories too, actually, the people who said, no, I am not called to celibacy, and to figure out why, or to kind of dig a little deeper to into their psyches and their perspectives, because, you know, because for whatever reasons, I have no idea. But I know that there are plenty of people in our group who are just extremely sexual, whether they've had sex in the past once, twice, many times, multiple times, or if that's just like something they think about, long for constantly, to a degree that I don't understand and can't relate with. I know that there are plenty of those stories represented in our midst too. And so we are all across the spectrum on this as far as desires for sex and the feasibility of celibacy, because I see celibacy as quite feasible for myself for the rest of my life. Now, granted, that comes with challenges, like from beyond the physical sexual component, it's like the challenge of more companionship and family, and especially in the later years, like what does my life look like then as a single person? But who's to say I get married now and then my spouse dies in a car accident a year later, and then I'm single again. And so like ultimately we're all going to be single again in the next life. And so it's like, okay, there's singleness from dust we were singleness and dust we were born, and to singleness we will go. To the playing harps on clouds, right? Is that how the story goes? Yeah,
that's it.
So I have a question for you guys. I tweeted this a while ago, and I think it resonated with a lot of people, but it made at least one person pretty upset. So I thought it'd be a good question to throw out here. Is celibacy queer? I think celibacy kind of like there's a place under the queer umbrella of sexual deviancy for celibacy.
Is celibacy queer? I love that question. Jacob, why don't you answer it?
Absolutely. I would say yes, it is, but it should not be. The end.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I love that answer. Yeah, I feel, because here's the thing. When I think about celibacy and when I think about my counselor with all of his monk friends in the monasteries, I can't help but wonder, the secondary question is, what are all of those guys' sexual orientations? Like, give me a ballpark. Is it 50-50, 50% straight, 50% gay, 33% bi? Like, what's the layout of these people's sexual orientations that maybe wasn't the defining reason or decision for their vocation, but inevitably played some part in it? They had to reckon with something in their sexual orientation to choose a lifetime of celibacy, straight or not. And so I just am curious, because my inclination would be that a majority, if not a vast majority of them, and maybe I'm just completely mistaken, the vast majority of them would be some level of attracted to the same sex, and that this is something they felt God leading them into as part of a way to reckon with that and to live in community in brotherhood with fellow believers. And so I'm curious. Like, I want to talk. Yeah. Can I talk to a perfectly straight monk and get his perspective on the show? Because I would love to hear his journey of getting there, because my first inclination is, an answer similar to Jacob's, is that it feels more of a queer, like it comes from more of a queer background, has more of queer layers to it than not. And that theoretically it shouldn't be. Like, straight people should have the exact same option to choose that as well as gay people. Like, anyone should have the same equal option to choose marriage or celibacy. But why is it feels, that's just like totally a gut feeling. I have no scientific research or anything to back this up on, no studies or polls. Maybe they're out there, I don't know. But like, but that would be my answer too, is that it does feel more of an SSA thing, a gay thing, a queer thing than not.
Okay. So you would say it sort of like has this resonance with,
for sure,
with queerness because of the people who we speculate wind up pursuing celibacy.
Yes. Pure speculation, pure gut feelings. But I feel like Jacob and I were both very intuitive people, and our feelings should count for everything.
Yeah.
Amen, Tom.
I think like
INFJs.
What I've thought about this is that like queer means like transgressive of culture or society in some way. Like that's, or with your sexuality. Like if your sexuality is transgressive of society, that seems like it's pretty commonly accepted that that's what queer means. And I think celibacy is transgressive of society and culture, like the culture we live in, because it is very unusual. It is very like kind of outside of what's commonly acceptable. You know, it's not like suburban, tame suburban application of your sexuality. I could see how like celibacy being a decision you make maybe makes it something a little bit different from like having queer sexuality, where it's not really a decision you make. It's just sort of like an emergent property of your personality or your mind or your heart or your body in some way. So I can see like maybe there's a disconnect there, but I think the people who were, or the person, at least one person who was upset about this idea was more defensive of the idea of kind of something that's like they perceived as like goody two shoes, sort of invading the like the queer space, the queer umbrella, which was offensive to them. But I would say that like celibacy, if you've been in the church for a while, it's not really, I mean, if you've been in like the same churches that I've been a part of, it's not always like a goody two shoes, like doing what I'm told kind of act.
Good thoughts. Look, I come with my polls, and Ryan, you're coming in with your tweets. This is amazing. We're doing all kinds of research and putting it out there and seeing what the people have to say. I love that. That was such a great question. Well, look, to close things out, you guys, I figured we should dive into the good book, the Bible, the Bible, because it's the book for me and for you.
Preach.
I wanted to focus. Thank you. I wanted to focus on two passages. Jacob referenced one of them. We'll look at Paul and what he had to say, but I wanted to go all the way back, you guys, all the way back to the beginning of time, to a little garden you might know as Eden. And I kind of just wanted to get your thoughts on this verse, Genesis 2:18, and how that relates with your life, your journey, your celibacy, your celibate status. If you see any correlation whatsoever. But in Genesis 2:18, God says it is not good that man should be alone. And so then he created a woman to go with man. Have you ever looked at that verse and that concept of man and woman in the garden? People will interpret that so many ways. That's where we get so many divergent beliefs about sexuality and marriage, and whether God blesses it, condones it when we're talking about same-sex marriage, same-sex unions, and sexual relationships. It all like centers around that word alone. Like, okay, what does it mean to be alone? Alone as the only one of your kind in the human race, alone having someone there with you, alone, and then you can keep carrying it levels and levels further, like alone sexually, alone creating life and having children, to make yourself less and less alone. And so I don't know, do you guys have any thoughts on being single and celibate at this stage in your journey? Like, do you feel alone?
Do you have 20 minutes to listen to me rant?
We have about 30 seconds.
Okay, so in 30 seconds, I would say that...
what would you tell your Lyft driver going from one traffic light to the next? There you go. This
idea comes with the first commandment, which is be fruitful, multiply. And then later on, we see that commandment transcended and superseded by the Great Commission of go therefore and make disciples among the nations. And in that commandment, Jesus is kind of like saying, look, the kingdom of God no longer spreads through biological reproduction, but through spiritual reproduction. And so I think that this concept of it's not good for Adam to be alone is true in that moment. And God's solution to that is a woman, Eve. But that reality is transcended and superseded by the spiritual community, the spiritual family that Jesus establishes. And so to answer your question, to the extent that I have spiritual family, that I have connection with my spiritual family, I do not feel alone. Now, does that always work out in the ways that I long for? No. And so sometimes I do feel alone. But I don't think that it has to be that way.
Yeah. You can feel alone. You can feel lonely, and those are valid and legitimate.
Mm-hmm.
But as we say on the tagline of this show, Brian, you are not alone. Even I can't spoil it for everyone. If this is your first time listening, I don't want to spoil the ending, but yeah, no, I totally track with you there.
Yeah. I don't think I could say that in a better way.
Boom. Then don't stop.
I'm stopping. But I always have a but. Sorry, it'll be a really fast but. I think that if there's any fear that like goodness of not being alone is only connected to marriage and sexual intimacy, all that you need to do is look to Jesus, who lived a perfectly full and good life, and is our example of the pinnacle of humanity,
Mm-hmm.
he was a single celibate man. And so we can take comfort of that. If that is true, then we can trust that it is possible to live a good life of flourishing, even if you are celibate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like who looks at the life of Jesus and comments and said, you know what would have made his life better or more fruitful or more productive or more inspiring? He got a wife.
Mm-hmm.
And he had 12 kids to be biblical, or 7, I don't know. No, Jesus is such a great example. And I love that it's not like you can't use the Jesus cop out, because there are plenty of other examples too. Like you look at Paul, you look at a majority of the disciples. I don't know. We don't necessarily know for sure all of the disciples, but I would imagine just based on records that we have that it's like a majority of the disciples seem to have lived single, presumably celibate lives, along with others in scripture too. And so there are examples in scripture that point to the idea, the notion, as crazy as it is in 21st century America today, that you can be single, celibate, and incredibly fruitful, productive, and to live an inspiring, full life. Like that's totally within reach. I love Jesus, you guys. Do you love Jesus?
I love Jesus.
I love
He's the
Jesus.
best.
I love weird Jesus too, but I also love regular Jesus. Jesus had this to say in Matthew 19. I love his answers to people. His answers to people are so great. I just love it. So he's talking to people and they're having this dispute. They're having this discussion about like Mosaic law and marriage and divorce in the what we know as the Old Testament. And so in Matthew 19, verse 10, it says, the disciples said to him, Jesus, if such is the case of a man with his wife, it's better not to marry. And Jesus said to them, not everyone can receive this saying, but only those to whom it is given. And I love that. It's like, yeah, you know what? Maybe it is better. Maybe it is better if you're just going to get divorced, if that's like a thing that could happen, or you think it's too hard or you can't commit. If you find a reason to divorce other than sexual immorality, essentially, then maybe it's not, maybe it's better. You just don't do it. Don't get married. That's Jesus saying that, which, man, I wish I heard that more in church. I don't think I ever hear that. But Jesus is saying maybe it's better that you don't get married. Maybe not. I could hear weird Jesus giving a great sermon about this, but also regular Jesus right here. For those that don't know, weird Jesus is a reference to one of Ryan's pastors. You had to have been there. Go back and listen to that episode. Yeah. It was so great. Shout out to Pastor Matt for his incredible rendition. But then in that same, I'm not going to read the rest of that because Jesus goes on for a little bit and he talks about eunuchs. Do you guys have any thoughts on eunuchs? I know we're running out of time, but have you learned anything? Because I'll admit, I don't know much about eunuchs. This is where I have blinders on. I don't know a whole lot. I did not do a deep dive into eunuchs, but do you guys have any insights, perspectives on eunuchs? Because Jesus references them in this same conversation.
Yeah. Do you have 25 minutes?
My gosh. No.
I'm going to need 20 minutes also.
Maybe we'll just have a eunuchs episode, you guys.
Ooh.
Sure.
Eunuchs episode.
I'll bet the YOBBERS would vote for that.
Eunuchs. Oh yeah. I'm intrigued by it. I would this would be a topic that I would have to, because I don't want to just start talking about eunuchs acting as if I know what I'm talking about, because I honestly don't. I'm just being upfront and real. I would love to learn about it though. And that could be fun to like do some legitimate prep work on, because I prep every episode, but that would require way more of a deep dive than a lot of our episodes. So I don't know. If y'all ever want to do a eunuchs episode, let me know. Call me online, everybody.
Some time to figure out if we can get a eunuch voice on the show to share.
Yes, I would love to have a eunuch on the show. That would be fantastic. But I wanted to close the episode, or one of the things I wanted to close the episode with was what Paul had to say in 1 Corinthians chapter 7. Paul said this, now as a concession, not a command. I love Paul too. I love how Paul words certain things. He says, now as a concession, not a command, I say this, I wish that all were as I myself am. But each has his own gift from God, one of one kind and one of another. To the unmarried and the widows, I say that it is good for them to remain single, as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to burn with passion. And that's Paul's words. Any thoughts on our brother Paul?
I think that I actually tweeted this once, is that
Ooh,
I would have
Jacob
the
with
most
the tweets.
incredible, I would have the most incredible respect for any couple who has that passage read at their wedding. I think that would be incredible.
Because then they're saying like, no, we were burning with passion to
and like
an
almost
degree,
and like have the pastor give kind of like one final chance of like, hey, like right now it's not too late. Like you don't have to do this. Like you choose to be single. Can you handle it?
You don't have to. And then the presider asks the man, "Are you burning with passion?" And he says, "I am." And then she asks the woman, "Are you burning with passion?" And she says, "I am."
I am.
Yes.
And then they get married.
And then as we referenced in the last episode, then we all know that are watching, we know they're about to have sex in like 5 hours. Give them some time, but they'll get there.
You know, I've talked to people who are in this place of wanting to have sex with someone of the same sex, but not feeling like they have the moral liberty to do that, and they look at this and say, like, well, I'm burning with passion, but just not for a woman. So, like, what is this? What does this passage have to say to me? Like, this doesn't call me to singleness because I am indeed burning with passion, but the passion I'm burning with isn't going to be like somehow addressed by marriage to someone of the opposite sex.
Mm-hmm. To which I think I would say that more often than not, the burning passion to have sex is not actually the root of that feeling. That there are so many deeper emotional realities that are happening, to where I would venture to guess that 98% of the time, having sex is not going to be what helps to cease those anxious feelings and that kind of burning. Agreed.
And so then the question is, why does Paul prescribe marriage in that situation?
Which I think that is one of the reasons of why, like, the way that he talks about it and sets it up, it's almost like this is the last resort kind of thing. It's like, I'm not actually putting this forward as what should be typical, but if you have run out of options, that this is an option. Like, this is a,
like, if you're gonna do the nasty, you might as well just be married.
Yeah. and actually I know some couples who have been super honest about their dating life and like the ways that they've chosen to interact, that like they actually chose to get married earlier than what they might have as a means of actually being obedient to a passage like this.
Mm-hmm. We have somebody, I mean, I won't name the name, but we have somebody who comments on our blog semi-frequently. And this, I would venture to say this passage resonates probably a lot with him, is that, you know, someone attracted to the same sex and definitely feels more of that sexual drive, you know, certainly compared to me, probably compared to a lot of people. And then got married to a woman and feels that sex drive, that passion, that burning, whatever you want to call it, feels that adequately expressed and contained. So I'm sure that passage I feel such a disconnect with, because I have no idea what Paul's talking about. Burning with passion, what does that mean? I ain't been burning for that, but a lot of people do, and a lot of people have, and a lot of people would use that as great counsel for their lives and point to their marriages as a fulfillment of that, of Paul's admonition. But I just love the realness of that, like, because again, this is not something that you hear in church. It's not something I heard in church growing up, that like Paul's almost recommended default state is singleness. And oh yeah, if you get married, then okay, cool, great for you guys. But I would prefer if you just not. And you can't argue with the fact that Paul was, super impactful, no doubt had all that extra energy and just had more of a mindset toward Christ. Not that you can't be, again, not to like throw shade on the married people. Of course you can follow Christ and do things for him and serve him well as a couple. Like, I'm not saying that at all, but it's just it's just different. It's a different type of wiring, a different type of proclivity when you're single or when you're celibate.
Yeah, and I just want to throw out there for our younger listeners, just as a practical
Shout
matter,
out to the senior
I would
boppers.
say, the Zoomers. I would say don't confuse, man, I kind of want to have sex with a burning passion that calls you to become married, because I don't think you have to be asexual to experience a good celibacy.
That, and I think that if you want to get an honest and real look into how, for lots of married people, their sexual longings are not always met. I think we have this very false idea, and I think this happens much more with men. I think that like, oh, once I get married, I'm having all the sex I could possibly want. I will be completely satisfied in every urge, every longing that I could ever have. And that's simply not true. And that's a lie that I think that people find out once they get married, and it causes a lot of conflict.
Well, y'all, let's close with this question, because this is the crux of it all. One of our yobbers asked this question, and I thought this would be an amazing / impossible way to end the conversation, but we're going to try. We're going to do our very best. And he asked this: what does healthy sexuality look like for a celibate gay Christian? I can't pretend my sexuality doesn't exist. So how do I express or experience sexuality if I'm unmarried and abstaining from intercourse?
I feel like if I had a good 24 hours warning, I could come up with a pretty pithy response to this. But on the spot, I would say that my sexuality is more than just the act of sex. And so if I'm not, and it's more than just things that lead to the act of sex. And so I think I can express my sexuality rather than repress it in my celibacy by letting my sexuality inform my same-sex relationships. Not that I'm trying to like get in all my guy friends' pants, but realizing that like the way I see them, the way I care for them, the way I like them is gonna be kind of suffused with my sexuality, and the way I interact with them, the way I pursue them, the way I love them is part of expressing my sexuality, even though I'm not having sex or trying to have sex with them, and would choose not to given the opportunity.
Amen.
Yeah, well said. I think if you can make that distinction, like sexuality, like yes, the desire to have sex, that's part of it. But yeah, there's so many elements when you start to dive into what is sexuality. And sexuality, we talked about a little bit in our sex talk episode. It's kind of a fun segue to go from the sex talk to celibacy from these back-to-back episodes. But like the essence of sexuality, it's like connection. It's connecting with kind of what's lacking or what I feel I'm missing or some kind of other. And so human connection, that's for me is what I always return to when I think about how do I healthily express my sexuality. It's healthy connection with other men, and it's not going to be a sexual relationship. There may be times in my life I've yet to experience it, but there may be times in my life where a sexual desire kind of emerges. But at the core of it, like it's more of just a desire for intimacy, a desire for closeness, a desire for maybe more of an ongoing, regular connection than sometimes the other party can adequately offer. But it's just being in strong connection and not feeling like I'm on some island somewhere disconnected from the other male, from the male species of which I am included. Like it's been a long journey, honestly, of feeling like I am included. I am a man. I am part of this tribe, even though I have lots of different proclivities and personality quirks or what have you. But to feel included and to make efforts to include, because inclusion doesn't necessarily just come to you. Sometimes it does, but a lot of times you have to put forth the effort to connect and reach out. And sometimes it means being burned, and sometimes it means being not feeling reciprocated, but to put yourself out there, because that's important to do. And that's been a huge part of my journey too, of just reclaiming some sense of peace in these turbulent waters, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think at the core of us being sexual creatures, and as you just said, that it is all about connection, and it's about us being drawn outward out of ourselves to one another. So I think that you take that and all of the energy that you feel, and you take your gifts and your talents, and you love those around you wholeheartedly and passionately, which might mean to love others well, there will be things that you have to sacrifice. And so I think a part of how we are choosing to steward our sexualities with whatever kind of orientation that you find yourself with, it does mean laying down a part of your life and your wants and your longings to wholeheartedly love other people well.
Do you feel called to celibacy? Being on the receiving end of that question in my counselor's office, it kind of took me off guard, which is kind of surprising considering that I've been single and celibate from the womb. You'd think that this would be a question I'd have actually asked myself or pondered or thought beyond abstract terms. But no, this was the first time that I specifically thought about it. Do I feel called to celibacy? What does that even mean? Would it change anything if I was or if I wasn't? Up until this point, singleness, celibacy had just been the norm, the default, something I honestly didn't give much thought to. It flew out of my convictions on faith and sexuality, and that was it. But was I just going with the flow these last 3 decades, or was there something more I could be doing? Could my life be fuller or more clear, more direct, more impactful and fulfilled if I definitively knew in my heart that I was or I wasn't called to celibacy? What would that look like, and what would that even mean? Author and priest Henry Nouwen had much to say about faith, sexuality, and celibacy as he wrote deeply of his internal struggles. And he wrote this: "The best definition of celibacy, I think, is the definition of Thomas Aquinas. Thomas calls celibacy a vacancy for God. To be a celibate means to be empty for God, to be free and open for his presence, to be available for his service. I think that celibacy can never be considered as a special prerogative of a few members of the people of God. Celibacy, in its deepest sense of creating and protecting emptiness for God, is an essential part of all forms of Christian life: marriage, friendship, single life, and community life. Every relationship carries within its center a holy vacancy, a space that is for the first love, God alone." And so, my brothers, single, celibate, married, and anything in between, may you empty yourself, free yourself, and open yourself for God's presence this day. Not just clearing away the clutter to squeeze him into wherever corner he may fit, but ever reserving for him the entire dwelling, this sacred vessel, your body, your heart, your life, and your story, beginning, middle, and end. May all else flow from the filling of this holy vacancy, including our relationships with one another, relationships with our spouses, and relationships with friends, and each of our fellow man. Let us love the Lord and love one another from this spiritual occupancy, this deep well, full to the brim, drawing from it daily, a well that with faith and with courage will never run dry.
Well, what a beautiful celebration of celibacy. So shout out to our sponsor, Cake, helping us to celebrate things. And also a special shout out to our friend Ben Daniel Parman, whose Twitter display name right now is Celibate Good Times Come On. So thank you, Ben, for helping us to snag that sponsorship and really seal the deal on that one.
Wow. I think that's the fastest segue to thanking our sponsor post benediction we've ever had. So this is clearly a celebratory occasion. Thank you, Cake, for being here.
Cake sent me 25 boxes of cake for doing all this. So I have to go and make all my cakes.
Not off-brand cake. Just we want to be very clear. It's cake. Just cake. Real quick, you guys, vanilla or chocolate?
Chocolate.
Vanilla.
Vanilla for sure, all the way. But I like chocolate. But
I don't have
would say
time
vanilla.
for vanilla.
We don't have time to dive into this conversation. But what we do have time for is your conversation, Yobbers, people listening to our show, because not everyone listening to our show is a Yobber. But if you want to become a Yobber, you know how to do that. Please become one. But no, if you want to comment on this episode about celibacy, we talked about so much, you guys. Whether you're single or married, I would love your perspective on this topic. I would love to know, do you feel called to celibacy? Is that something you've considered? Yes or no? Are you open to marriage one day to a woman? Or I guess if you're a woman listening, to a man. I'd love to just hear kind of starting from there and then let the conversation unfold from there. So go to yourotherbrothers.com/podcast, find the episode 64 post on celibacy and tell us your celibate story. Celibacy story. I don't know. I've been trying to make too many celibate puns and there's not really a lot of them. Celebrate is the closest I could get. But I'd love to hear your journey because we got a lot of great stories in the Yobbers group. So if you're not in the Yobbers group, and you want to contribute to that conversation, head over to our website and add yourself to the story. Or y'all know what to do. Y'all should know what to do by now. Call the Yob line. It's the hot new trend. It's what all the cool kids are doing, whether they're on Team Jacob or not. 706-389-8009. I love getting calls. I would love to hear some cell calls from the Vol cells, or I don't know.
No.
However you self-identify. I would love to hear from you. Just give me a call. I love hearing your voice. Oh my gosh, I forgot to mention this whole episode, you guys. This was voted on by the Yobbers. I totally neglected to even mention that we put a poll out in the Yobbers group, and this particular topic, we didn't choose it. It chose us. Y'all chose it. Yeah. Our faithful, wonderful Yobbers who also contributed some incredible questions in this episode and some comments and stories. So big shout out to our Yobbers group. You really did make this episode possible on so many levels. But we'll be back next time with another brand new episode. And it should be fun, whatever it is. So for all your other brothers, my name is Tom.
My name is Ryan.
My name is Jacob.
Reminding you, the spoiler from many, many minutes ago, you are not alone. Even the sparrow finds a home. See you next time, everybody.
Bye, folks.
Bye. Love you, everyone.
Thanks for listening to Your Other Brothers podcast. Our show is edited and produced by Thomas Mark Zuniga. Theme music is Fear Is Not My Lover by Nathan Rousseau. We'd love to hear your story. Comment on this or any of our episodes at yourotherbrothers.com/podcast, or share a story to play back on our show by calling us at 706-389-8009. You can also email us at podcast@yourotherbrothers.com or write to us at Your Other Brothers, P.O. Box 843, Asheville, North Carolina 28802. If you enjoy our show, consider rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts. You can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Your Other Bros. Finally, if you'd like to further support our storytelling, community building efforts, consider becoming a Yobber. Yobbers pledge monthly on Patreon and receive perks like bonus podcast content, access to a secret Facebook group, regular group calls with fellow patrons and authors, and more. Visit patreon.com/yourotherbros for more information. Until we journey next time, we're glad you're with us.